Welcome again to beautiful Unity of Missoula. Here we are. Can't keep us down, right? Here we are. So, I just wanted to kind of give you a little intro here. The Speakers Committee, when we get together, and we've been doing it on Zoom now, of course, what we determine is the next few months' themes for the speakers. And what we try to do is to keep them broad enough so that the individual speakers can have their own spin on the themes. And sometimes that does make them seem really general, you know. And sometimes the person at the fifth Sunday is like, what's there left to talk about, you know, so that's a little bit difficult sometimes. Then also we have, and as you've heard, the power of the month is release, or sometimes it's called renunciation, sometimes it's been called elimination, and the kids really thought that was funny, especially because the color was brown. But, I mean, they were serious. I mean, the filmers were serious about this. They were talking about our body functions and how they work, and they didn't think that was something to think was a joke or embarrassing or whatever. It was something to be thought about, the way in which our bodies function and work well for us, because it's so much easier to feel connected to the source and to the all-loving goodness of the Spirit and God if our body temple is at its best, right? And that can be a work in progress a lot of the time, I think. So anyway, we also have an overview sometimes. Sometimes we have Lent, we have Advent, and in this case, of course, Thanksgiving, or an older word, which isn't used as much anymore, but that I really like, and the Fillmores use a lot, and that's the word praise, which is an encouragement kind of word. That which I praise grows. It's kind of in the same vein as saying, in that, the way in which you think it in your heart, so you are. Who was, I think, maybe one of the Greek philosophers was the first one that was attributed to, but I'm not sure. I'll take a little side path here and also say that we work with the representatives, and this month is Thaddeus, who was one of the disciples of Jesus, and also Ruth, who was a matriarch in the Hebrew scriptures, and they both are related to the heart. They both are related to opening and letting go. There was a lot more in the Metaphysical Dictionary about Thaddeus, and yet it related to what was also there about Ruth, because it said, of the heart, large-hearted, warm-hearted, of the breast, or that which nurtures, the milk of compassion and kindness. And this is straight from what Charles says in the dictionary. Thaddeus represents for us the faculty of elimination. In the body, this center is situated near the heart, or just below it. It is just as necessary for us to learn to let go of conditions, things, substances, in consciousness, body, and affairs when they have served their purpose and we no longer need them, as it is that we should let hold of new ideas and new substances to meet our new needs and our new requirements. That was a long sentence, wasn't it? Let's try that again. It is just as necessary to let go, release, eliminate thoughts, conditions, and substances in consciousness, in our bodies, in our affairs and circumstances. I would add relationships, when they have served their purpose. It's just as necessary to do the process of letting go of it as it is to wanting to welcome. Now that's a great segue into one of the biggest teachings in Unity, which is about affirmative prayer. And one of the most popular of our tools, you might say, that we utilize. So how does that relate to giving thanks? How does that relate to praise? How does that relate to our theme of moving toward gratitude and gratefulness? Well, one of my favorite guys, you know, is Reverend Ed Rabel. And he says, I want to read this to make sure I get it right. Remember that affirmation is saying yes to your divine ideals. Okay, so saying yes to an idea. But you say yes to it with all of the faith and trust that you can engender to support that yes. These aren't necessarily statements that accurately describe the facts. Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of the time the things that I've tried to work with in affirmation, I sometimes have to start with, as Unity teaches them, denials first, to kind of get some things out of the way, which would be the release part, right? And then the space that's there allows me to move forward into doing what he just said here, which is to take all of the faith and trust that I can find, or that I can find. If I can't find it, maybe you can find it. Maybe we can get together and support each other to find it. That's what's so powerful about our prayer ministry here, our chaplain ministry, and our prayer group that takes these prayers that we put here and holds them every single day. Someone else can lift us up when we need to be lifted. Again, he says, the point is to hold to it again and again. Hold to this ideal, whether it's perfect health or whether it is abundance, whatever you would praise into growth in your life. Remember that you must also resist the pull of outer distractions. And I have in my parentheses, this takes much longer in some cases than others. That's right, that's a joke. We might also find, and this I've seen, especially with the death of loved ones or accidents, murder, suicide, things that are really, really hard to put into some place that makes sense. And certainly we've seen a lot of that going on with just all the division and enmity and polarized ideas about, what is truth, what are facts, what is science, all of these things that this pandemic situation has kind of outpictured for us as human beings, I think. I wrote this. I said, we also might find that we are not able to see the whole fabric in this life on this limited plane, and we must just accept that praising and giving our prayer efforts add to the healing of others and the entire world. And that is also something I wanted to bring up, and it's been a while since we've been talking about, where do we fit in the scheme of things, and will we even be a unity church in 10 years from now if a younger group of people don't come in and kind of take over? I want to say that I believe it's always seemed this way to me, that in a way our purpose, or one of the biggest things we do as Unity Church and now Unity Community, is that we do this, what I just said. We hold this thing, we hold this vision, we hold it for our community, but we also hold it for the world. We hold it for the future. We hold to the righteousness of appearance, not to what we see at the surface. It's almost as if, I know we're not really a monastery or something like that, but that is a primary function of some spiritual communities, is just, and when I say just, I want to say, put that in quotes, because it's, to me, sometimes it's a much bigger discipline than actually doing service or having actions. But what they really do is hold in consciousness, lifting up the world, lifting up the earth. And never will know who they've touched, never will know for sure the outcome or the manifestation of that. Well, I'm going way off into another place, so I'm going to come back to this moving toward gratitude. Okay? I think the beginning point, of course, is in the direction. We're moving toward, not away from. We're moving toward. We're also moving. Now, I just said all of that about the inner. Now we're going into the outer. It's not passive. We're moving. And here's something that was kind of a flow of consciousness that came to me when I was thinking about where I was moving. I'm not thinking about how I'll be grateful when the pandemic's over and the country is no longer in a civil Cold War, or when we have ethical, practical, unified leadership in how to reverse destructive climate change, or when all my relationships improve, or when I'm able to make more money, or when my children and my grandchildren never struggle, or my children and grandchildren are not struggling or suffering, or when I'm able to get over or get through some terrible loss or hardship, or even injustice that I'm faced with, or maybe a scary diagnosis for myself or a loved one, or just those inevitable slings and arrows that come with getting older. Talk about, that was a long sentence too, huh? It was kind of like a poem, I guess. Okay, no, my movement must be toward being grateful right now, which is interesting. I didn't know that they were going to read When Things Fall Apart, because Pema's, one of her favorite things to talk about, and it's a Tibetan Buddhist idea, is just start where you are. Start right where you are. Where you are is the best place to start. So let us begin with whatever willingness we have, no matter how small it is. We open our hearts to the all-loving goodness of God, or life, or hope. And I do have a short text from Jesus that I want to give to you. So I'll tell this other story really quickly, but I love the story that Oprah Winfrey tells about her mentor, Maya Angelou, and how and how Oprah, this was when she was going through that lawsuit, and this is many years ago, but she was being sued for some things that she'd said, and it was a rather large association of people that were kind of calling her to task about it, and she had called Maya and was crying and basically falling apart. This is what she said, and just could not see her way through this, and felt, as we sometimes read about in the Gospels and in the epistles, the people that felt that they were being persecuted for what they believed in and for being and trying to be in integrity, and then having something like that happen. And she was going on and just really, really lamenting all of this, and Maya just said, you have to stop. You really need to stop, and you need to tell me 2 or 3 things right now that you feel grateful for. Things that are working in your life, things that touch your heart, things, maybe you saw something, maybe you saw a beautiful bird today. Just tell me. Now, of course, I'm adding my own, I'm not reading this, so this is my memory of the story. The thing that Maya said to Oprah that stuck with me, that's so powerful, and that I think leads into this teaching of Jesus, is when you are the most challenged, when you feel the least able to be grateful for anything, is the very time that what being grateful can do for you can enrich you. And that sounded a little convoluted. When I'm having a hard time being grateful, I will get the greatest gift that gratitude and gratefulness can give me than any other time. It will serve me more at that time than any other time, which goes into my story about Jesus here, because I happen to think that that can be also used in terms of saying, it's not so much, oh, I'm so glad things aren't worse. It's not that, oh, I'm glad it's worse for somebody else and not for me. That's not what's happening. What's happening here is actually fairly tricky spiritual yoga, you might call it, that, as I said, Jesus also taught. He used the example of loving our enemies, though. But I think a little bit of gratefulness can be a lot like a little bit more love. So let me read this, what he said here, when he was in the middle, about the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Got to find my bookmark here, of course. Come on. Anyway, it was kind of in the middle of all of those other, the Beatitudes and all of the many things that you would recognize. But he says, so you have heard it said, this is verse 43 in the 5th chapter of Matthew. So you've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of God, who is perfect. God makes the sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. If you love only those who love you and are easy to love, what reward have you? So, I don't know how you heard that. Did you hear that growing up? Did you ever hear that teaching growing up? I don't know how you heard it, but my initial hearing of it, probably because it was interpreted by Protestant biblical scholars of the 19th and 20th century, was that it was an admonition or a chastisement. It regarded our never-ending laundry list of imperfections and sins. Another unattainable virtue in the quest to become a good Christian. I'm not getting any laughter here. I should have a little laughter, shouldn't I? Or we have the New Age version, a good truth student. Should never fear. Should never be negative. I'm not being too sarcastic, I hope. Or self-help, which works very hard to help you become a better person. Okay, to me, it goes back to our theme. What direction am I moving in? It's like a direction to move towards. I may not be able to love my enemies, okay? Especially if I think they are doing harm, causing harm. But I can move in the direction of believing somehow I don't know the whole picture. I don't know what's going on. I think Louise talked about that in her talk a few weeks ago. It's an instruction to me on how to turn up the heat on my spiritual practice. And I don't think he's saying, what reward, I don't think reward is quite the right word. I didn't have time to go back to the Greek and kind of look at it, but my sense of it is it wasn't reward. I would say, what growth do I have in loving people that are easy to love? What growth do I have in just being grateful when everything's going wonderful? My growth comes, November's a tough month for me. 26 years later, and November is still a tough month for me. I was just a kid. I think about it now, I thought I was so old at 41 years. I was a kid, and my life just blew up. And yet I do remember, even then, I remember thinking, at least I don't have to do that today. At least I've already done that part, and I can move into this next part of, having a beautiful memorial service for my husband, finding out what my kids need, going to the wrestling banquet with Soya, who's just lost his dad, 5 days ago. And those of you that know about that know what I'm talking about. Sometimes I question whether my motives are selfless when I think they're maybe self-serving. And sometimes I have to remember what Emmett Fox taught about turning away from the lions. He uses the story in Daniel about Daniel being put in the lion's den. And he said, if you look at this one particular beautiful artistic depiction of that, Daniel is looking to a light that's coming in the window, and the lions are back here. And Emmett Fox says that's what we need to do. We need to look to that light and not look at the lions. And so, just kind of giving you an idea of where I went with this and moving in the direction of being grateful. The other thing I saw was, and I should have a sign because it's a little bit better when it's written, but what it said was gratefulness equals great fullness. Gratefulness gives us great fullness. And just a little bit of it brings the willingness to open up and see that we really are the light of the world, and that heart that's being represented when we let go reveals that to us. Thank you. So let's just take a few minutes and maybe bring some of that down into our hearts. Listen to Jeff play some meditation music. Maybe think about some things that we might want to release or let go of or forgive. Think of that which we are able to be grateful for this morning. For life, for healing and wholeness, for abundant good. For your love that opens our hearts and connects us to one another. Your love that allows us to know that we really are not separate. Your love that is kind and tender-hearted, filled with mercy and grace. The beauty of the earth as she begins to prepare for her sleep of winter. The russets and gold and brown that are left after the glorious golds and yellows and reds have moved on. We just breathe together, relaxing into our hearts. The Christ says we are the light of the world. And we now feel that light, that brilliant golden light, streaming into the radiating center of our heart, the heart of this spiritual community, our Missoula community, our country, our world, and our sweet Mother Earth. We relax and we let go of all that which no longer serves us, all that which is not ours to do. And we give thanks for the divine order that reveals to us our part of the whole. And we do give thanks and rise up willingly to do that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we say, Amen. This is the time that we share together in closing the prayer for protection. And I believe everybody's familiar with that. If not, I'll go through it once. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. So let's say that before we get up to stand where we are for the peace song, which will be led by Jeff. And I invite those on Zoom to stay connected through the song. But let's say together the prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.